Having some connection problems. Let's see. Okay. Looks to be okay now. We just had a little low Wi-Fi situation. Seems to be working. Good Vach, Shavua Tov. It's a new week. Who's in the house with us, helping us light up the darkness? Remember, when you comment where you're tuning in from, signals to Facebook that something of value is happening here, a conversation starter. And we've got some beautiful conversation starters coming your way. This was a great page. Berachos 29. We're going to be getting into it momentarily. Leslie Ann Landsberg is first. Wow, can hardly believe I'm catching you live. Great to be with you, Leslie Ann. I believe you're in Texas, right? Pamela Tillman from the Catskills, and James D. Roth, Old Faithful, shall we call you, from Indianapolis. Steve Davis from St. Louis. Ivan in the house from Las Vegas. Let's make a l'chaim. All right, I've got some nice Japanese whiskey here. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakol nihiyad bevaro. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, by whose word everything comes into being. And we are certainly going to be studying the word of the divine today. Robin Raymond Hunter says hello from Birmingham, Alabama. Great to have you all with us. Please, people, keep chiming in. Let me know where you're tuning in from. Let me know if you have questions. I usually can't see the questions, even though it's on the screen. You know, it's a phone screen right in front of me. And while I'm focusing during the class, I can't always see the questions. But at the end of the class, I try to scroll back up into the comments. And if I see a question there, I will certainly try to answer it. All right, we are in chapter 4 of Berachos, the first tractate of the Talmud. We've been doing this in our new cycle. And we are in page 29 today, right? It's 29. So we're starting essentially the 5th week, right? The first teaching of the 5th week that we are doing this. I'm sorry, it's 29, but it's AT Daily number 28. So this is the end of the 4th week, right? We've now completed 4 weeks and we haven't missed a day. We've done our daf every day. We're teaching this class every day. With God's help, this thing will stick for 7.5 years. It's a big commitment, but we can do it, and we can do it together. It's been a real blessing for Accidental Talmudist. It gives Nina and I great joy to see that this daily show, it's working. We're averaging, somewhere between 2,500 and 4,000 viewers a day. So it's having an impact. It's making a difference. People are appreciating it. And a lot of people are going on their own Daf Yomi journey because of it. Remember, if you hadn't started already, you could start. You can easily catch up. We're only 1 month into the 7.5 year journey. The first volume of the Talmud, Berachos, is all about blessings. We spent the first 3 chapters studying the requirements and some of the conditions pertinent to the daily recital of the Shema. And now in chapter 4, we're looking at the prayer, meaning the Shemona Esrei, the 18 blessings, also known as the Amidah, the standing prayer. This is the basic prayer that is actual prayer. When we recite the Shema, we accept the yoke of heaven by declaring God's unity, God's sovereignty over the universe. Now, in the Amidah, we pray, right? We give thanks and we give supplication. And 6 days a week, this is the basic prayer, morning, afternoon, and evening. On Shabbat, we say the Amidah also, but it is changed. It is a shorter Amidah that does not include requests for stuff, because on Shabbat, we want to be much more at peace and in gratitude, and we don't ask for things. We don't make supplicatory prayers during Shabbat. So, on this page 29 of Berachos, we begin by doing we don't really get into this question deeply, but we're starting to look at how these 18 blessings were formulated. And what we hear is that the 18 blessings already existed in the time of the Second Temple. but that it was after the destruction of the temple when the sages moved from Jerusalem to the little town of Yavne and set up the academy, right? The academy of the sages in this little town of Yavne. Then that is really when Judaism, the way we know it, began to take form as the sages sort of shepherded the Jewish people in their transition from a temple-based religion to this more spiritual and prayer-based religion that we know today. Praying already existed, right? Torah services, synagogues, all these things already existed in the Second Temple period. But they were still sort of, hovering around the centerpiece of the religion, which was the sacrifices being brought in the temple in Jerusalem. Now that was gone, these prayers became much more important. And the sages took very careful look at them to make sure that the prayers, sort of reached a state, a formula, if you will, which is where they needed to be to shepherd the people in their long post-temple journey. A journey we're still on 2,000 years later. So, one of the things that changed in this period is the institution of the 19th blessing. So actually, it's called Shmona Esrei, the 18 blessings, but there are 19 blessings in the Amidah. The prayer that was added, the blessing that was added, was blessing God for taking care of, almost in a mafia way, taking care of heretics, right? So heretics were a very serious thing. It wasn't just that the sages were saying, we're praying for God to remove heretics from our midst because they were religious fanatics who didn't want people around who disagreed with them about how to worship God. The heretics in question were people who had become extremely dangerous. And in an earlier time, while the temple still stood, there was a period in the dynasty of the Hasmoneans, the late dynasty of the Hasmoneans, when there was a king, Yanai, who was sort of swayed by these heretics in the form of the Sadducees. And there's a lot more to this. This requires a lot more study. I only did a cursory look at this tonight. But basically, the Sadducees were a group that said that the oral tradition is false, that only the written Torah is to be followed, and any rabbi who claims that the oral tradition is real is dangerous. They got into the ear of the king, and it resulted in many sages in that late Second Temple period being murdered. Okay, so these heretics were a serious danger. They were the ones who, actually were going out there and killing the leaders of the people, the rabbis, the religious leaders of the people, so that they could get more power. It was a very serious threat to the people posed by these heretics. And the rabbis were not a military organization, and they didn't go around killing people. They prayed for help. Okay, so they were praying for help, but they instituted in the daily prayer, which we still say today, that God should crush, root out, destroy the heretics in our midst. But it's not, they don't mean people who disagree with us. They mean people who endanger us, literally endanger our lives from within. And really, what's worse than a traitor to the Jewish people who endangers them from within? And we've had that in the millennia since. So that was the blessing about the heretics. A teaching comes along with this that once this prayer, this blessing was added to the formula of the 18 blessings, now becoming 19, if a prayer leader stumbled in any of the blessings, including the blessing against heretics, it's okay. We wait for him to get it right. No big deal. If he omits the prayer, the blessing of that, omits from the prayer, the blessing about the destruction of heretics, then we are suspicious that he is a heretic, and we remove him from leading the congregation in prayer. The rabbis then introduced this, the abridged version of the daily prayer, and here it is. And this is interesting. So the Shmona Esrei, it's long. It takes a while to say it. I mean, people who say it fast, probably get through it in about 5 minutes. If you say it's slow, you could spend 15, 20 minutes doing it. And there are times when, for whatever reason, exigent circumstances beyond your control, so you're running out of time. And let's say that sunset is coming, and you're going to run out of time to say the afternoon prayer, right? Or the fourth hour, as we discussed, was it yesterday or the day before? The fourth hour is coming. You're going to run out of time to say the morning prayer in its time. So there's actually an abridged version of the Shemona Esrei that you can say. You should not make it a habit to do the shortened version. It's very shortened, quite abridged. So one should not make it a habit to do the abridged version just because they don't want to spend so much time in prayer. But when circumstances demand it, so there's a much shortened version, and I will read it to you. And so this is the short version of the daily prayer. And really what it is a short version of the middle blessings, because you still say the opening, where you say, "Blessed are you, Lord our God, God of our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob," etc. The one who grants life to the dead, who gives healing to the sick, who raises the bowed. We're not really doing a class on the Shemona Esrei now. I should probably do that. But right now we're sticking to this Talmud page. Maybe tomorrow I'll just take us through that blessing for people who are unfamiliar with it. But in any Jewish prayer book or online, if you just look up Amidah, Amidah, which means the standing prayer, then you will see, the formulation that we all say around the world, all Jews say around the world. Tiny differences between Sephardic and Ashkenaz and Sfard, just tiny differences, but basically the same. So all the middle blessings after the introduction can be the long form. Just as an example, so here I'm using, I have lots of siddurim in my house, lots of prayer books. This is one that I'm enjoying quite a bit recently because it's new. This is the Koren Complete Siddur, Sfard. So Sfard is how Hasidic synagogues pray. It's particular little nuances that are a little different. But so if we just look at the morning Amidah, right? So if we could just talk about, I wasn't planning to do this, but okay. There we go. Right, so the Amidah, that's where we are right here. And then we just get into, so there's the introduction, right? Blessed are you, Lord our God, God of our fathers, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, etc. This is all the introduction. We praise God for sustaining the living with loving kindness, who has great compassion to revive the dead. He supports the fallen, heals the sick, sets captives free. He is faithful to revive the dead, etc. That's all the introduction. And then we get into the middle blessings. Right, so we would say, "Ata kadosh v'shim hakadosh, kedoshim b'chol yom yehallelu chesed, ki el melech gadol v'kadosh ata baruch ata Adonai hoel hakadosh." Right, so you are holy, and your name is holy, and holy ones praise you daily, Selah. For you, God, are a great and holy King. And then Baruch ata Adonai hoel hakadosh, and that's the usual formula. We describe the reason that God is to be blessed, and then we bless Him in each of these middle blessings, right? For knowledge, you grace humanity with knowledge and teach mortals understanding. Grace us with wisdom, understanding, and knowledge that come from you. Baruch atah Adonai honein hadas. Blessed are you, Lord, who graciously grants knowledge. So we describe why the Lord is so kind and good to us, and then after we describe why, then we bless Him for doing that. That's the formula for all those middle blessings. But when time is very rushed, so this is the abridged version of those 13 blessings. You would just say, "Grant us understanding, Lord our God, to know your ways, and sensitize our hearts so that we may revere you, and forgive us so that we may be redeemed, and keep us far from our suffering, and satisfy us with the pastures of your land, and gather our scattered people from the four corners of the earth. Those who go astray shall be judged according to your will." That is the blessing of the heretics. It's actually quite a bit harsher when we say it in its full form. But continuing this abridged version, and you raise your hand against the wicked, and may the righteous rejoice in the rebuilding of your city and the restoration of your sanctuary and in the flourishing of your servant David, and in establishing a light for your Messiah, the son of Jesse. Before we call, may you answer. Blessed are you, Lord, who listens to prayer. That's the shortened version. And there are other English translations of the shortened version, so that if you're familiar with the shortened version and you say it in English, you may have heard a slightly different translation, and that's what that difference is. But in Hebrew, the shortened version is the shortened version. Now, we're not supposed to do the shortened version in the rainy season. Why? Because the shortened version doesn't have an adjustment for the prayer, the little line that we add, which is a request for rain in the rainy season, right? So that begins at Sukkot and until Passover, right? So the winter, the rainy season, when we adjust the daily prayer a little bit, 3 times a day, and we make a request for rain in the blessing of the years. So the halacha is that we should not do the abridged version during this time of year because we will not have made that adjustment for rain. However, regarding the request for rain, since it is an adjustment to the daily prayer, sometimes people forget it. I think they forget to make this adjustment for the rain. So the law of what we have a lot of stuff that affects our daily prayer in this part of the Talmud that we're studying now, and so I think it's worth for people who are learning this and trying to pray accordingly to say, so this is the law regarding if you forgot to add the request for rain into your daily Amidah. If he failed to request rain in the blessing of the years, right? So the blessing of the years, so you know what we're talking about, right? This is one of the blessings. It's the middle blessings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's the 7th blessing of the middle blessings, the middle 13. And we say, bless this year for us, Lord our God, and all its types of produce for good. Grant dew and rain as a blessing. We say that in the winter. In other seasons, we just say grant blessing. So that's the adjustment. So grant dew and rain as a blessing on the face of the earth, and from its goodness satisfy us and grace our years, the best of years, as a blessing. For you are the good and beneficent God who gives the years their blessing, and then we bless him. Blessed are you, Lord, who blesses the years. Baruch atah Adonai mevarech hashani. Now, if you forgot to do that because you just pray so quickly every day, and this can especially happen, right, when we enter the winter and people forgot to make the adjustment on the day or the first few days when for the last 6 months they've been praying without that phrase, and now they need to add it. So what happens if they forget? So now we learn, if he failed to request rain in the blessing of the years, he recites the request in the blessing, who listens to prayer. So that's the last of these middle blessings. We bless God for being the one who hears prayer from everybody. It's not the last one, but it's near the end. And if he only realized his omission after completing that blessing, but prior to beginning the blessing of the temple service, where we ask him to find favor and to restore the temple to Zion, so he immediately recites the request for rain and then continues with the following blessing. If he began the next blessing but has not yet completed the Amidah, he returns to the blessing of the years and continues from there. However, if he completed the Amidah prayer before he realized that he forgot to add the prayer for rain, he must repeat the whole Amidah prayer. The only exception is if you forgot to say it and you're still standing there and you haven't taken the 3 steps back and 3 steps forward, but you're just adding some personal prayer at the end. So then you could just go back to the prayer for the years, insert it there, and repeat from there. Okay. So that was regarding what to do when we're adding the prayer for rain in the winter and you forgot to do it. Okay. That's the request for rain. What do you do if you omitted it? And then we have just one last thing. I don't normally read so much to you right from the text, but there's a few things here that I thought it was just worth doing. This one's important. So regarding this idea that it's a lot of prayers that we say every day. And if you pray every day and in synagogue, it's a big commitment. And so people, not because, they're negligent or because they don't care about their religion and about God. In fact, obviously they care. They go to shul every day, sometimes 3 times a day. But still, they might say it fast, right? They might say it fast, and it kind of becomes prayer by rote, right? And you need to avoid that. Like, as I said yesterday, there's still something beautiful about even praying something that you just recite it fast, because not every day is going to be that big, special, spiritual breakthrough where you're just completely meditative and in the zone and have a transcendent experience. Many times you just got to say it, right? You just got to put in the time, and you're putting bricks in the mansion that is eventually going to lead to, light coming in on some days, right? There's some days that you're going to have the transcendent experience, and it's going to be more transcendent because you put in your time every day. Nevertheless, even though you're repeating it every day, and even though it becomes by rote, and even though it becomes something that's very fast, it cannot be completely by rote. We need to struggle, to fight, right? To endeavor to include at least one real moment every time we pray, and not just run through the words. And we learn that in part from here on today's page. We learned in the Mishnah that Rabbi Eliezer says, one whose prayer is fixed, his prayer is not supplication. Now here, supplication doesn't mean just asking for stuff and sort of successfully asking for stuff, right? It means that he's not connecting with the supplication with God. The Gemara asks, what is the meaning of fixed in this context? Rabbi Yaakov Bar Edi said that Rabbi Oshaya said, it means anyone for whom his prayer is like a burden upon him, from which he seeks to be quickly unburdened, right? We got to get away from that. Prayer can't be a burden, even if you feel like it. You're not always there. You're not always super connected. It's not always going to be the big spiritual experience, but it can't be like a burden. At least once every time we pray, right? It's got to feel like, we're grateful for the prayer. We're grateful to be there with God in that prayer, having that encounter. You got to find that at least once. The rabbis say this refers to anyone who does not recite prayer in the language of supplication, but as a standardized recitation without emotion. And we have a note here from Rav Steinsaltz that what the rabbis mean by that is that according to the sages, the demand is merely that one turn to God with an expression of supplication, right? Like, you got to mean it. You maybe it's just outward, but you have to adopt a feeling in your prayer that you mean it. And that's why you'll certainly see in lots of Orthodox shuls, people move their bodies, and they really get into this prayer, and their bodies are moving back and forth. And that helps them, assume a posture with their body, at least, of getting into it. And often where the body goes, the heart will follow. And Rabbah and Rav Yosef both said it refers to anyone unable to introduce a novel element, i.e., something personal, reflecting his personal needs to his prayer, but rather it's fixed as somebody who only recites the standard formula. Where you want to be is that you introduce a novel element, something particular to your personal needs. You see, supplication here is you should ask God for what you need. You should ask God to fulfill your worthy desires. You should tell God what you need and why you need it. Because when we address our personal needs, we get real. We get real with God. And that's how you can, are more likely to have that one authentic moment every time you pray. If you don't just go through the formula, but somewhere in the fixed prayers, in the formulas that we recite, you go into yourself and add what you really want and what you really need and what you're really thinking about that day. That is to be commended. Now, right away, the sages say, but Rabbi Zera said, I could introduce a novel element in every prayer, but I am afraid that perhaps I will become confused Consequently, there is no room to require the masses to introduce a novel element to their prayers, right? So don't go too far. don't lose, the prayers instituted by the sages because you're just going to do your own thing. It's a balancing act. You want to do the prayers that you're obligated to recite. There's an obligation to say these prayers for a Jew, for a Jewish man, 3 times a day. But among them, find a moment to go personal. And even in most prayer books, there's prompts, even within the prayers, that this is a place, for example, in the prayer for healing, to insert the names of real people in your life that you are praying for that need a healing. Let me just say right now, please everybody join me in praying for the healing of Marjorie Bas Marjorie. She's not Jewish, and it's very rare for a Jew to have the same name as the parent. But this is I think she's 9 years old, and this girl really needs a healing. She's in the hospital. She's in an induced coma, and please pray for Marjorie Bas Marjorie. And other things that you can insert along the way. So I think I made my point. I'm sorry to be so repetitive, but it's important when we pray to get real with God, tell him what we're really thinking about, what we really need, what our hopes really are. And then prayer is not fixed. It is not by rote. When you introduce this authentic, personal element. Okay. And lastly, we have on this page another famous formulation. Famous meaning it's just part of our daily lives now. And that is right at the end of Daf 29. Here in Berachos, we have the Traveler's Prayer, very famous. So if you're Jewish, if you're observant at all, you're familiar with the Traveler's Prayer. And especially in ancient times, if you went traveling, you were in danger. To travel was to be in danger. I guess at any time there's some danger in traveling, and these days people are all too aware of this coronavirus, which the reports of it in many places around the world. Please God, cure everybody who has been smitten with this coronavirus, and may we find the cure, and may it be soon, and may no one else be harmed by it. Let's say amen. But when we travel, because of disease, because of robbers, because of con men, because of animals and beasts, and who knows what dangers may befall a person when they're out of their element. So when we travel, we say the Traveler's Prayer. There's some conditions, some rules exactly about how and when to do it. But basically, when we're flying somewhere, we say it on the plane, when we started to taxi, when we pull away from the gate. I feel like the trip is starting, but we're not in danger yet. So we often say the Traveler's Prayer as we're pulling away from the gate on the airplane. And what is the formula for the Traveler's Prayer? May it be your will, Lord my God. And this was actually later turned into the first person plural. Here it's originally written in the first person singular, but we say it in plural, so I'll adjust that. May it be your will, Lord our God, to lead us to peace, to direct our steps to peace, and to guide us in peace, and rescue us from the hands of any enemy or ambush along the way, and send blessing to the work of our hands, and let us find grace, kindness, and compassion in your eyes and in the eyes of all who see us. Blessed are you, Lord, who hears prayer. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that a beautiful prayer? Especially like this idea, and we actually have in the daily prayers as well, give us grace in the eyes of all who see us. Let us find grace in the eyes of all who see us. Wouldn't that be a great prayer to have answered every day? And all these prayers, when we ask God to do things for us, if they're in our power to do for ourselves, then we're really asking God to strengthen us in that work. Finding grace in the eyes of people we encounter is something that we can, encourage and work toward ourselves by treating people with kindness, by being interested in them, by greeting them with a cheerful countenance, as we've spoken about before. Finding grace in the eyes of people we meet is something that we can pursue and work toward, and we should. And so when we pray to God to grant us grace in the eyes of all who see us, we're also praying for strength to help us in that work of connecting with people in a positive way. All right. Nina Eigerman in the house from Boston. Great to see you, Nina. I know that you are taking the Daf Yomi journey, and I wish you great strength and success in that. Great to have you in the class. Helena Hemila says, only men have to pray 3 times a day. Yes, women have a prayer obligation. It's different than men's. But men have the time-bound positive commandment. Women are generally exempt from time-bound positive commandments. So the idea, especially in ancient times, is that women did not have the time or the availability to pray 3 times a day because they had other responsibilities with the family. So women do not have that as an obligation. But they do have the obligation to say Shema, as far as I know. I always forget these rules, and I really ought to know them well. But I think Nina's watching, and she can chime in. What are women's prayer obligations exactly? I need to just have that teaching at the tip of my hands. I'm sorry I don't. So let's see. I thought there was another question. Jill Bonner Wilson. She says she's Christian and trying to learn more about the Jewish people. Well, thank you for being here. I think that it's very important to understand, and this is why we always light this candle at this show. Our whole mission here at Accidental Talmudist is to light up the darkness, right? The social media darkness, where so much bad stuff and trolling is going on, and we're trying to inject some holiness and beautiful words of truth into social media. But also, we have a prophecy from Isaiah that the Jews shall be a light unto the nations. So what does it mean to be a light unto the nations? It's to share our light. Jews have been so persecuted in so many different times and places, in so many different ways, with so much evil and so much concentrated Jew hatred directed at us and to harm us over the millennia, that, understandably, Jews have often kept to themselves and tried not to mix so much with the non-Jews. Now, there are certain laws that are intended to keep us separate. There are certain laws that don't make sense. They're not for our health. Like the reason Jews don't eat pork is not because pork is less healthy. We don't eat pork because that's just one of the laws that God gave us that are particular to us, right? But because that and many other laws of kosher eating are different, it tends to make Jews, and the fact that we can't drive to synagogue on Shabbat if you're Orthodox, so you have to live in a community where you can walk to the synagogue. And there's all kinds of rules like that keep us in community, and those things are good. But there's many, and perhaps many more teachings that are really just wisdom for living. And we have been nurturing that wisdom for 3,000 years, not only for the benefit of the Jewish people, but for the benefit of humanity. And thank God we live in a time where it's safe to be a Jew. We live here in America, at least, where it's generally safe to be a Jew. I mean, there have been some real tragic attacks and there's rising anti-Semitism. I'm not going to say that doesn't exist. It's very real. But generally speaking, we've never had it so good, and we've never been so safe, and we've never had so much access to learning and to community and to kosher restaurants and kosher food available in every supermarket in America, etc. So in this, recent safety that we've acquired, at least relative safety, so now we have the opportunity to not just learn and keep learning, but even to share what we've learned. And so here at Accidental Talmudist, what we're always trying to do is to share the wisdom of the Jews in a way that benefits all people. And that's why our slogan is wisdom for all. Okay, any other questions here? And so Nina just put it there, simple. Okay, so I guess a simple obligation. Women are obligated to pray at least once a day. So that's pretty simple. But I got to make a study with my rabbi, just like, what are the laws for women? I'm sorry. I need to know that better since the question comes up all the time. All right, my friends. It is great to be learning with you on a Saturday night. I wish you Shavua Tov, a good week, a good vach in Yiddish. That's also a good week. Good vach. Who can say it? Good vach. It's a nice saying, right? It comes off the tongue well. In our community, just passing, when you walk home from temple on Saturday night, it's just so nice. You pass over here. Good vach, good vach, good vach. That's a slightly different sound than good Shabbos that we say on Friday afternoon and for Saturday morning. Cheryl says, I always catch the end, but you caught it. It's great to have you here, Cheryl. And then you can go back and rewatch the recording. We do have a plan. We should be hiring our new assistant soon, and then we'll be able to just get some of these tasks done. And one of them is to put these shows on YouTube. I know a lot of people have started listening to it in the car. And I guess YouTube makes it a little bit easier, just the way the app works on the phone, to be listening to it without watching it. I'm not sure exactly what the technicalities of that, but we do plan to get these daily shows up onto YouTube. And I believe that's all. Super Bowl is tomorrow. I'm going to try to get live to tomorrow's show before the Super Bowl if I can. I'm also attending a ceremony for Magen Am, our security organization, Jews, learning how to protect our synagogues from harm. May we always stay safe. So let me I'm sorry, I can't commit to a time of what time this show is going to be tomorrow, but I'm going to try to get to it in the morning. So probably in the morning, maybe like 10 o'clock, I think would be nice, 10 o'clock Pacific. I'll see if I can. All right, my pals. Sending you lots of love from the West Coast. Take care.